and welcome to this special Security Journal America's Leaders in Security podcast, a part of our SJA Security Outlook 2025 series. I'm your host, Victoria Hanscomb, editor of Security Journal Americas, and today I'm joined by Kyle Gordon, Executive Vice President of Global Sales, Marketing and Commercial Excellence at AMAG Technology. So Kyle, how are you today?
Hi, Victoria. I'm awesome. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. Appreciate it.
Fantastic to have you on the podcast, and thanks so much for joining me for this conversation. So before we do get into the discussion, for listeners who might not be familiar with you, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey in security?
Absolutely. I'm a second generation security professional. So my dad grew up in the industry. I grew up watching him in the industry. Instead of going to fun summer camps, I was often at some dealer convention or something, which at the time may have seemed a little bit lame, but it actually was laying the groundwork for what would eventually be a career that I've been now fortunate to be going on 17 or 18 years. I got to double check within it. I first kind of learned it from my dad and was sort of my first sales manager and mentor, if you will. And then right out of college, kind of got into the integration side. So I started on the channel side. I was there for the majority of my career. I've been at AMAG now for a year and a half. And prior to that, I was with the same integrator for my entire career, kind of holding various originally individual contributor roles, and then moving into different leadership roles and that executive leadership. So, and now I am thrilled to be responsible for the commercial organization globally at AMAG, which encompasses not only our sales teams, but our marketing teams, our application engineering teams, and kind of all of the spots that touch the customer, if you will. So that's a very quick synopsis of my journey and where I'm currently at.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So, of course, we're going to be thinking ahead to 2025 and what's next for the industry. But before we do that, I wanted to think about 2024 and what's happened over the past 12 months. So, in your opinion, what are some of the main events that have impacted and shaped the security industry over the past year?
I think this past year has been pretty interesting. I think when you look at, certainly, if I've been listening to podcasts like this, which I have for the last 5 years, probably every year you'd hear mobile, right? Because that's just something that we constantly say is like right at the precipice of changing the industry. But this year, especially Wallet, felt like it took a very significant step forward in being a realistic deployment for end users. Prior to that, there was a lot of pilots. There were a lot of kind of beta tests. There was a lot of excitement, but not a lot of practicality. And I think, at least from my lens, that may have been the biggest technology to really step forward in 2024. You heard a lot about it in 2023, but you actually started to see deployments in 2024. And I do think that is going to continue to scale significantly. We certainly think it will. We've got plans around that. So, 2024, I think mobile, and then within mobile, Wallet was a little bit of a defining moment. And then I think about some other things. It's just when you look at how the industry works together or doesn't work together, I think end users are expecting something that the industry currently isn't delivering, and those expectations are driving new entries within the space. And they're also forcing, hopefully, legacy providers to adapt. So that's a little bit about what I saw kind of in 2024. A lot more, obviously, we could go into, but at a high level.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, now looking ahead a bit more, what should the security industry be thinking about for 2025? And what are some of the main challenges that you think the industry might encounter?
So I think the industry needs to continue to prepare itself for a scalable mobile solution. I mean, almost to just kind of pile on to the point we just made. The technology is ready. That's fine. People can have a credential in their phone, on the wallet. It works. The technology has been working for a couple of years. The challenge is, how do organizations make enhancements to their administrative process to be able to support a easy, or frictionless is oftentimes overused. I don't think you're ever going to get a frictionless experience, but how do you make this experience easy to apply, easy to implement? The way that we used to, you can't treat wallet like a card. They're not the same thing. Like the way we used to buy things in bulk, and it's significantly different. You can't treat it like so many of the other SKUs in your category, because it's non-transferable. It's apples and oranges, right? So in order for us to actually support wallet adoption within our space, you need just as much innovation in the back office as you do in the technology itself. Because the technology itself is, I'm a layman, but I can understand it's pretty straightforward and it works. But how you make it easy for the customer to obtain is another challenge altogether. And that's what I think the challenge. Some of the challenges have been in 24. I think that will be an ongoing challenge here in 25 and beyond. And in the same sense, any challenge is an opportunity. I think you'll see that the organizations who have the customer's experience kind of embedded in their strategy will be the ones to have the most success, at least from an early adoption standpoint. That's one thing looking ahead in 2025. The other thing I think that we mentioned earlier about end users being more engaged, significantly more educated. I think what's being challenged right now, and I think it's an appropriate push by the end user and by integrators, is, hey, how come these manufacturers don't work better together? Right? How they say they integrate, but the integration stinks. I'd rather not do the integration because it's not supported. When there is an issue, I'm just sitting there dealing with finger pointing about, whose issue it is, who wrote the integration to who, where is it getting caught up? And at the end of the day, as an end user, I don't care. My system isn't working as it was sold to me. And I have a business risk that currently isn't being addressed. And your inability to work together is, at best case, inconvenient. At worst case, it's a safety risk. It's a life safety risk, right? That's the business we deal in. So I'm hoping, and I kind of subscribe to this idea, maybe this just comes from my integration roots, that a little bit of everyone's business is better than all of someone's business, because that is kind of the traditional way that the manufacturing industry came up, is like, hey, land and expand, right? And I truly believe that if we find ways to work together better, that I'm going to satisfy my organization from a growth perspective, because there's going to be more people who want to work with us. And at the same point in time, hopefully holding less people hostage. We don't want hostage, we want volunteers, right? So I think that's another thing that in 2025 and beyond, and by the way, that is a quote from Mike Tomlin, who's a head coach in Pittsburgh. I am not a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, but that coach, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, but that coach always resonated with me, and that quote always resonated with me. So I do think it absolutely applies to our industry and the opportunities we have to improve. And I'll say this too, because I'm lucky enough to be pretty close with a lot of the other leaders within the industry. There is absolutely an appetite for this across peers, right? It's just how do we get through the red tape? There's a lot of red tape. So how do we get through it? So I think when we're looking ahead to 2025, you will see more manufacturers pursue a more collaborative stance. And then where that doesn't happen, you'll see new entries continue to fill the gap in the space. So yeah, that would be kind of what I'm looking at next year.
Well, speaking of new entries and filling gaps in the market, what might we be seeing from AMAG Technology in the new year? Are there any exciting announcements for 2025? Anything our listeners can be looking out for from the company?
Yeah. So of course, we'll be doing a podcast if there weren't some things exciting to share. Things that I can say without without giving away too much, because some of the stuff is still under works. But I would start with this. Before I talk about products, it's really important, and this sounds very boring, but getting process right is the first thing that we've been working very hard on, right? Because in order to drive innovation, you have to build a culture of significant discipline around what projects you take on. And I wouldn't be sharing any news that probably was foreign if I was to tell you that one of the challenges that AMAG has had in the past, we're very fortunate to have a very large customer base, mostly of enterprise multinational organizations. What comes with that sometimes is that you take on a lot of customization. And customization is the quickest way to you're always going to have to do a little bit of it, right? But if you don't balance that correctly, you can quickly get into some technical debt and not be able to pull your overall strategy forward. So what we've been doing over the last year is really balancing out that technical debt versus future project innovation ratio to ensure that we are always moving forward. So next year, you'll see some significant announcements around enhanced panel offerings from an access control standpoint. One of the things you've probably already seen and you will continue to see in 2025 is a lot more messaging around our total identity suite. So we're one of a few manufacturers that are fortunate enough to have our own visitor management suite, our own access control suite, and our own ID management suite, right? So what that does for the end user is it allows them to really just simply manage an identity, whether it's in an automated workflow or if it's in a new guest kind of perspective from a visitor perspective, or if it's just an everyday access control. A lot of times what you'll see in the space for people who don't offer all of those things is that you're kind of bolting on those cumbersome integrations that I referenced earlier. We have all three. We're lucky enough to have all three. And from that, you'll see a lot of announcements around additional improvements within that hosted suite that our customers can take advantage of. So I think that's a little bit of it. The other thing I'll say is we want to make our data available for people to leverage it however they see fit. And so the days of sort of custom reporting and forcing our customers into custom reporting, listen, I don't know the type of reports you as an organization need. You know that. Let me just make sure you have access to the data so you can do whatever you want with that. So that's sort of the biggest things that we're looking to get out of next year. in addition to some general improvements, health monitoring, things like that. So that's a condensed version of a 90-minute roadmap presentation in 90 seconds. So hopefully I did it justice.
Absolutely, you did. And yeah, it sounds like there's some exciting things going on next year. So looking forward to when that all happens in 2025. But yeah, thinking a bit more broadly, how does innovation at AMAG support the industry, and how will that help the industry to progress over the next 12 months?
Because AMAG is one of the first access control companies in the space, right? It's over 50 years old. Patented the magnetic stripe, right? Like, I mean, from that perspective, we have a lot of connections. We have a lot of end users who are asking us to really think about things differently. And I think our perspective is unique from a sense that enterprise customers are asking for things that are a little bit different sometimes. So, they'll push us and we'll bring something to them and they'll be like, yeah, but is it scalable? Like, here's what I want you to think about that. So when I think about how we can support it, the overall industry growth, it's in thinking about things holistically, thinking about things from sort of a large end user perspective. And also, we have a large base of strategic partners. So how are we exchanging ideas with them to make sure that our strategy isn't being thought of strictly in a silo, and that our strategic partners who we integrate with, who we co-sell with, who we incubate with, are there for the discussion as well, and also there to challenge us. When we say voice of customer here, we don't strictly think voice of reseller or voice of end user. It's anyone who works with AMAG. That's the VOC that we're seeking. And so from that perspective, I think there's a lot that we can add to that conversation, but in the same sense, a lot from that conversation that we'd like to take away.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Carl, for joining me on the podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you.
Well, thanks for having us, or me. I had fun.
Fantastic. And thank you also for tuning in to this SJA Security Outlook 2025 episode of our Security Journal America's Leaders in Security podcast series. Keep an eye out for our next installment coming soon.